Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today I've got somebody very unique, very different on the show. I'm excited to introduce Nick Prefontaine. He's a motivational speaker and can impart such a lot of great wisdom as part of what we're going to be sharing today. So welcome, Nick.
So excited to be here, Lyn. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So just to give the audience a little bit of appreciation of what you do and why you're doing it, explain a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I mean, Lyn, it all goes back for me. My whole journey and why I'm doing what I'm doing today goes back to a fateful moment when I was only in 8th grade. So I was only 14 years old and I was at ski club with my friends, and my friends and I had brought our snowboard gear onto the bus to get ready on the way so as not to miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And we got to the mountain, the rest of the class wasted time to go inside and get ready, but we were ready to go. So we headed right for the chairlift. And on the way up, we noticed we went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. And we noticed that it was kind of icy because it had been raining earlier in the day. However, that didn't slow us down. So it went right over, the chairlift went right over the terrain park where all the jumps were. I knew as soon as I saw it that I had to go off the biggest jump in the terrain park. I mean, Lyn, there wasn't even a moment of thinking, oh, should I be careful today? Or maybe I shouldn't do it. I knew that was what I was doing. So, I mean, right down to, I was already thinking about what we would do after I landed that big trick. Maybe grab a burger and fries in the lodge, or we could head over to the other chairlift for some runs on those trails. I was just happy to be there finally. So got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. And going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard, and that's the last thing that I remember. They wanted to actually bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital, and they couldn't because it was too windy, so they had to send in an ambulance. And out of all the paramedics in the area, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot, and I needed that to be able to breathe. He was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. Actually, he was coincidentally in the parking lot that day when it happened. So there were several things that broke the right way. So there are still several things that I can't explain because of the accident. And now I know that one of them is the reason why I'm here with you and your listeners today. So no matter the severity of your crisis, your decision to take action is your first step. So something else I learned was that my goggles were the only protection that my head had. And they told me that not only did they brace the goggles that you wear on your face when you're skiing or snowboarding. I don't know, for those of you non-skiers and snowboarders out there, I have to explain that. But not only did they brace my initial impact, as I continued to roll down the mountain and continued to hit my head, they told me that with each blow, the goggles moved to cushion the blow between my head and the mountain.
Wow.
So there were, like I said, there were several things that that broke that had to break the right way. The right paramedic, the right paramedic being in the parking lot, the goggles moving around my head. Then when I made it to the intensive care unit, I was out. I was in a coma, unable to communicate with anyone. And at that time, the only people, Lyn, who were allowed to see me were my parents. And the doctors would come into my room to share the not so good news, not so good news, not so good news, as I'm sure you can imagine, because they can't paint a rosy picture for liability reasons. So they came in and started to share that right in front of me because they figured, oh, he's in a coma. He's not going to be able to hear us. My mom stopped them and she said, no, no, not in front of him, because she understood that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. So
And were you consciously aware that you were looking back, or don't you remember?
no, that period of my life is gone. I don't remember any of it. So the yeah, the my parents, my mom made the doctors step outside the room to share the news, and then once they're outside the room, they shared with my parents that I probably wouldn't be able to walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again. And even if I was able to come out of the coma, there was a good chance that I would need 24-hour care for the rest of my life. So my parents, to their credit, didn't accept this like so many patients do as a death sentence. They took the information, thanked the doctors, and allowed me to treat it like any other situation. So this was no different than any other challenge that I have faced up to this point in my life. So I ended up being in the coma it was a partially induced coma because they had to wait for the swelling to go down in my brain. And we actually just passed the 23-year anniversary of my accident on February 5th.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Wow.
thank you. And I was talking, like, the more and more that as time goes on and the more and more I talk about this, the more details I'm learning. So I was talking to my sister just less than a week ago as of this recording, and she said, yeah, when I got to the hospital, they didn't tell me what happened. No one would tell me, but I just knew you got in an accident. And when I saw you, your head was like a basketball uh, because of all the bruising and everything that happened. So that was interesting.
Must have
That I
been,
got to learn though.
sorry, it must have been so devastating for your family to see you in that condition, and all the worry, stress, and horrifying thoughts that must have entered their heads, and especially on the back of the news the doctors were sharing about your prognosis going forward.
They knew the power of the human mind, and they didn't want that information, that negative prognosis, to seep through to my mind. So
Great.
that's why they had the doctors step outside the room to share the information. I didn't know any better. I ended up being in the coma for 3 weeks. I really don't remember a month because it was a partially induced coma. They had to wait for the swelling to go down in my brain, because if it increased anymore, I would have died. So they had to partially induce me. I was in a coma for 3 weeks. I really don't remember a month. So that period of my life is gone. I don't remember that. However, it was after a month I was transported to a rehab hospital in Boston. And that's where I really, for lack of a better term, Lynn, began my journey. And it was at this time that I started to unknowingly use a system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. I'll tell you how that all came about. So um, that's what I teach to this day in my keynotes and one-on-one work with clients, and also in the STEP video program. So that's STEP. STEP is an acronym, and what I can do is give like a 10,000-foot view, and then at the end, if anyone's interested in learning more, I can let them know how they can download it for free. So STEP stands for support. So that's the S. Make sure you have the support of your friends and family right from the beginning. And this is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. Trust that once you take your first step, your next step's always going to be available to you. And this also starts with trusting that voice that we all have inside of ourselves, but too often we ignore it. The way that I can illustrate this is after I was transported into the rehab hospital, I can remember this was before I could talk because I couldn't just waking up from a coma, especially a partially induced one, isn't like in the movies or on TV. It's not like you just open your eyes and okay, everyone, everything's back to normal. Um, so I didn't know how to do anything. So at this point, after within the first couple of weeks of being transported to the rehab hospital, I can remember overhearing my parents talking to my team of doctors and therapists. And they were saying, okay, what do we need to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? So I heard in the back of my head, you're going to run out of the hospital. So then I was able to communicate that to my parents and the rest of my team. And that became our common goal. And that's really where my company's name comes from, common goal. So then every week, that's what we were working towards. E is energy. So maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. And medication has the potential to get in the way of that. So unless it's absolutely critical to your survival, you should definitely try to get off of the medication as soon as possible. And what that meant to me, you get it, you understand. What that meant to me was I was actually, how I can illustrate this is after being transported to the rehab hospital and coming off of the partially induced coma, I was okay. So I always had like either an uncle, my dad, an uncle, or my grandfather stay with me during the night. And my mom would and her parents would stay with me during the day. So on this particular night, I had woke up in the middle of the night and my grandfather was staying next to me, and they would always sleep. Whoever stayed with me would sleep in a cot next to the bed. So I wasn't cleared to walk yet. So I woke up and I leaned over my bed. I had to use the restroom. So I said, Bub, and that's what I call him. I still call him that. Um, he couldn't hear me because I didn't have a voice. Really, I wasn't able to like elevate my voice at all. So I was like, all right. And this was before I was cleared to walk. I could walk, but I wasn't cleared by the therapist yet. So I lowered the bed, made it to the bathroom. Nothing happened. I got back. However, the next day the hospital found out and they freaked out. So like we can't have this and liability and everything. So they're like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna give him this much medication of this great new medication, and that should calm him down before bed. And my mom heard this, who was my support, my advocate, and she goes, "No, you're not. Just tell him not to do that." So they told me not to do that. And it didn't happen again. But if I didn't have anyone there, they would have just gave me medication just to make make their lives easier, I guess. And
Make
I
you
don't mean to be glib by
compliant.
saying that. What's that?
Make you compliant.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad we got off the medication as soon as possible. And then back to the acronym, finally, P is persistence. So once you take your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. And by continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. Um, so that if you fast forward a little bit, less than 60 days later, after being transported to the rehab hospital, Lyn, I realized my goal of running out of the hospital. And it wasn't like my work was done at that point. I had to continue to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months for the same things: physical, occupational, and speech therapy, 5 days a week. And then I also had to get tutored both when I got back home at the end of April 2003. I had to get privately tutored all summer long, 5 days a week, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. So um, looking back, it's a little surreal that only 18 months, because I'm sure I explain this a lot, but I'm sure you can understand this. When you're younger, time is compressed. So if you look like 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it seems like a lifetime. However, it's not really that much time. And the older I get, I'm seeing that. So only 18 months later, after finishing my rehab from being in a coma and my snowboarding accident, I got my start in real estate, and that was door knocking pre-foreclosure doors or homeowners that had missed several payments on their loan and the bank still hadn't foreclosed. So I would go door to door and try to set up meetings for one of our investors the following week. And it took a mentor reflecting back to me what this was. And because it was so soon after my accident, it was a part of my rehab, my recovery, going door to door, helping people out of their unfortunate situation. So if you fast forward a little bit, I continued doing that throughout the rest of high school. And then after high school, got my real estate license, joined the family real estate business, was helping buyers and sellers. And then in 2014, my dad came to me. He was starting to buy homes creatively without using any of his money or investor down payments or signing personally. He was starting to accumulate all these properties and he needed help with someone putting them on the rent to own market for to attract a rent to own buyer. And this is different than just like conventionally listing them as a realtor. So it's a totally different market. There, just to give you an idea, there's only 20%, 18 or 20% of the market who can market into a bank and get a loan today. So I still do this with my dad and our family real estate business. So we market to the bigger, the other 80% of the market. And really it's so interesting because over the course of the next 13 or 14 months, my income shifted where I was making the majority of income with him by January of 2016. So in 2016, I let my real estate license go and joined him full time as an investor. So I think now's a perfect time for me to take a deep breath and see if you have any questions, Lyn.
Well, I'm just I suppose, amazed and astonished, and want to give you a huge hug and a pat on the back, for all that you've accomplished after going through such a big trauma. But also, how great it is that you've come from a family that had the mindset and presence of mind that they did, to not be dictated to by the medical health professionals, and I'm going to put professionals in inverted commas, that could have limited your recovery.
Uh, Crucial, I think. And a lot of people hear my story and the application of the STEP system. And the common thing that I hear, and I talk about it within STEP, the ebook, which is the common thing that I get is, oh, okay, very nice, easy for you. You had a supportive family. That's why your STEP system worked for you and everything. However, I don't have a supportive family, so therefore what you're saying won't work for me. It's not applicable. One of the things I talk about in STEP, Lyn, is that your support doesn't need to be family. For me, it was because I was only 14 when I got into my accident, but it doesn't have to be family. It can be a friend or a neighbor always coming around asking if they can help. Maybe even someone you're not that friendly with. However, they always check on you to see if there's anything they can do to help you. But because a lot of people, in my experience, are locked in to this, it can only be family, they're shutting themselves out from the support and receiving support. That's a big thing. From anywhere else other than family. So it doesn't have to be family.
No, of course not. And like you say, it can be just somebody that's close to you, or an associate, regardless of whether that's family or friends or whatever. And it's just knowing, who you're aligned with in your, near proximity. No, can't say it. Proximity.
Proximity. I got you. I knew what you were saying. I knew what you were saying. Absolutely. And I think that was a good point. So I let my real estate license go in January 2016, joined my dad full time, helping rent home buyers and bringing them through the process, meeting with them, and then eventually accepting them and starting to work with them for our properties. And I actually had Lynn developed a voice issue um, in 2012 where it sounded really strained, like it was hard for me to get the words out. That's how it sounded. It didn't feel that way, but that's how it sounded. Um, so that's what I was dealing with, and I developed that in 2012. I eventually wound up in a voice specialist office in August of 2013. And the guy walked in the room, heard me speak, and right away nonchalantly goes, "Oh, that? Yeah, we deal with that all the time. We'll get you fixed in no time. Go see the front desk and schedule a Botox injection in a couple weeks." I was like, my mouth was on the floor because here I was, for the past year, from 2012 to 2013, I had been looking everywhere for answers. What the heck is wrong with me? Going to primary care physician, allergist, natural medicine, everything. No one could really give me an answer of what was going on. And going to speech therapy again on my own. So all these things I was doing, no one could really tell me what was going on. So to hear this, to get this affirmation of, "Oh no, you're not crazy. We totally understand what you're going through," it really put me at ease. And in August of 2013, I started receiving Botox injections into my vocal folds to relieve the tension. I had a lot of tension right here in my throat. And I actually had to continue getting those. And my last Botox injection was February 13th of 2020. So I had to get them for 7.5 years, along with their higher level speech pathologist to really retrain my throat muscles back to how they were before I developed any issues. And ever since I've graduated from high school, I've always had this, back to the voice in the back of your head. I've always had this voice in the back of my head that's always saying, regardless of what I'm doing, sales, real estate, marketing, anything, it's always saying the same thing. "Yeah, great, Nick. But what you really need to be doing is helping people through their life challenge or trauma, and then so that they'll be able to thrive with the rest of their lives." So, and telling my story from stage. So I've always had this voice in the back of my head saying that. And in 2016, when I joined my dad full time, we started holding annual events once or twice a year, where I've always had the opportunity to tell my story. And this has meant the world to me because I thought, "Oh, okay, I'm doing it. I'm listening to that voice, kind of, but not really, Lynn." So it took until September of 2019, me telling my story at our big event, where someone approached me after, named Sharon Spano. Sharon said she complimented me on my talk and said if I was ever looking to fine tune my message and bring it to another level so I could help the most amount of people, she could introduce me to some coaches and mentors that have helped her along the way. Well, I wasn't ready yet because I was still dealing with that voice issue. I mean, when Sharon saw me speak, I was pretty strained. I was like at the end of a cycle and needing another injection. So I was still in it at that time. I was in the final throes of the voice issue. However, I always hung on to her card because I liken that to that voice in the back of my head. I'm like, I have to do this because if I didn't, I'll be going the rest of my life not having what would have happened, what could have been if I followed that voice, if I followed the guidance of that voice. So in 2021, after the voice issue had worked its way out of my system, I finally reached out to Sharon. I said, okay, what do I need to do? Who should I talk to? She then introduced me to her mentor, who became my mentor, Trisha Brook. And on that initial call with Trisha in May of 2021, that voice just prior to that call, it just kept getting louder and louder. So, but on that call, I shared my goals with Trisha, what I was looking to do. She said that I should do the speaker salon where you commute to New York City for 6 weeks in a row. And on the final week, and wait, let me say this, you get to work on crafting a 10 to 15 minute talk with up to 10 or 15 other speakers on stage at the Triad Theater in New York City. And on the final week, the 6th week, you get to perform that talk with the other speakers for TEDx organizers, event organizers, podcast hosts, people who are looking for speakers for their stage. So she said that's 25,000. I said yes. I joined her. And another interesting point about working with Trisha, and I still work with Trisha. In fact, she sent me a message this morning. I haven't got a chance to look at it yet. The interesting point about that is since that initial call with her in May of 2021, there has been no voice in the back of my head. So what I take that, what I see as evidence of that is that I'm doing exactly what I was put on this earth to do. So during the speaker salon, halfway through the speaker salon, Trisha pitched the idea of what it would look like to work with her one-on-one. She told me that she specializes in helping speakers build out their speaker platform. Lyn, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what that was. However, I knew, again, I just had to follow this. I had to follow this guidance and the voice in the back of my head. So she said that's 75,000. I said, I don't have that in my back pocket. I don't have that on me on this call. However, give me a week and I'll figure it out. And 6 days later, I wired her the money. And I think it's the best decision that I've ever made because she was the one who helped me launch Common Goal, develop the S.T.E.P system, the S.T.E.P video series, and several keynote talks. So when Sharon saw me speak in 2019, that was probably the longest I'd ever spoke before. That was maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and I thought that was a big deal. Now I share 45 and 60-minute plus keynotes to brain injury associations and other organizations that support individuals that are going through trauma. And if you would have told me this is what I'd be doing back in 2018, 2019, I would have told you that you'd be nuts.
Congratulations. It's been wonderful to know and hear from somebody that's prepared to invest in themselves hugely in that way and take that leap of faith, because it does take a big leap of faith, doesn't it, to hear a big figure like that and think, oh, is this going to produce the results and desires and the goals that I'm hoping it will? And thankfully for you, it actually turned out exactly how you wanted it to be. So that's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't going to, I just couldn't. I couldn't live the rest of my life knowing that I had the opportunity to do this, and I didn't. So I know that I'm doing. So all right, falling to me, and I'm gonna get a little spiritual here, but I hope that's okay. The following that voice, because we all have it. We all have that voice. Now, to me, it's God. However, it could be the universe, God, higher spirit, your higher self. It could be whatever. However, as long as I know I'm listening to that voice, I know that I'll be taken care of.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that, and that's exactly my style of thinking as well. So I get it 100%. So just to start to wrap things up, Nick, what would be the best form of contact that people could use to get in touch with you if they wanted to connect with you?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So, what I shared is really only like a 10,000-foot view of the STEP system. To download the whole STEP system for free, STEP the ebook, go to nickprefontaine.com/STEP. And that's going to teach you all about support, trust, energy, and persistence. And it's just a part of who I am, what I'm currently doing. So yes, I'm doing this work with Common Goal and the speaking and supporting individuals that are going through trauma, and helping them thrive with the rest of their lives and speaking and everything. And I'm also doing the real estate too, the family real estate business that I'm still a part of. So if any part of my story and the real estate aspect piqued anyone's interest, you can check out our website. That's smartrealestatecoach.com/mastersclass. And there you can get registered for a free master's class going to teach you all about how we buy and sell on terms. That's what we like to call it, without using any of our money or signing personally. And then at the end of that, if it's something that piques your interest, you'll be able to take your first step and learn more. And that's really those are really the best two ways to get in touch with me. And I would say on my website, there's also links to my social media, which is LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm on those two platforms.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed hearing your story and how you now, feel like you and your mission is to inspire others and help others get over any serious trauma or challenges. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and experience.
You're very welcome. This has been a blast. Thank you.
So it just leaves me to say that true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.